Hello. Today, as well as being a Sunday, it's the feast of one of the co-patrons of Europe. It's the feast of St. Teresia Benedicta of the Cross, otherwise known as Edith Stein. You can probably tell from her surname that she's from a Jewish family. She was born in Lower Silesia, in part of that country which has moved between Germany and Poland. She was born on the 12th of October in 1891, which was the Day of Atonement, the day when sacrifice was made to take the people's sins away. That's important for what comes later. She was born to a devout Jewish family there, especially her mother. And she did all the things that a Jewish child does. Except that, of course, when she gets to her teenage years, she decides that she doesn't need God anymore, that God is not relevant for her life plan. Again, that's not unusual with people at 15. But she was determined that she was going to understand the world and herself and all that sort of thing without God. So this bright child, Edith, she went through exams with flying colours and went on to university. And she realised, she was studying psychology at the beginning, but she realised that actually it was philosophy where she needed to place her attention. And what really grasped her was a new philosophical school led by Edmund Husserl, and it was a school of what he called phenomenology. Now, phenomenology it's trying to break through an impasse in philosophical schools between those who just thought the thing out there was real and those who thought the thing in here is real. So you have sort of naturalists and idealists. And Husserl said, actually, let's look at how we see, how we perceive, what is my consciousness when I allow that thing to be free. I'm not going to place any predetermined categories on anything. I'm not going to appeal to anything else. Let's just investigate my consciousness of perception. How do I know? What's going on when I know? Why do I claim that I know? And my I have very detailed observations of the world around me. It can be quite an exhilarating way of beginning to understand your own consciousness of the world. Anyway, that was the school into which Edith was moving. Husserl supervised her doctoral dissertation, which she gained in 1916, and she became his teaching assistant. So at the university, first at Göttingen and then at Freiburg, he would give the great lecture to the great packed lecture hall, and then afterwards she would take groups of students to actually explain what he said. That's not an unfamiliar scenario for university teaching and assistant teaching. She called it her kindergarten, and she really engaged with the students there. More than that, actually, she even ate with them. It was usually the case that the teaching faculty didn't really mix with the students, but she didn't eat in her room. She went down and ate in their dining hall and talked to them and made friends among them as well. Another one of her contemporaries, another student of Husserl, was Martin Heidegger, who's going to lead a different school of phenomenology, existential phenomenology, and how different their paths were. Anyway, she's teaching, helping Husserl, and then she's always searching for the truth about things. That's what part of what philosophy does, is to search for the truth of things. What's behind assertions? What's behind the claims? What's behind the worldview? What's behind my understanding of myself in the world? What is this truth that I'm implicitly searching for, even if I don't acknowledge that? and this was her preoccupation. And she found the truth when she was reading one summer at a friend's place in 1921, the autobiography of St. Teresa of Jesus, St. Teresa of Avila. Here is truth, she said. And it had such an impact on her that she decided to become a Christian. She was baptized on the 1st of January, the Feast of the Circumcision, in 1922. And her new Catholic life was all absorbing. She knew that within it, and practicing it, and doing it, and being aware of it, that she would come further and further into the truth. She was a great friend of the Benedictines, and at those abbeys where the liturgical movement was really becoming strong, and that became an important theme throughout her Catholic life. Eventually she became a Carmelite nun. Those who give their whole mind and heart and everything else to God. And there she continued her philosophical studies. She translated some of St. Thomas into German. She also translated Newman into German. The first one to translate him into German. She worked within various groups to promote women's roles in education and to have a much wider base for education. And that's what she continued to do in her Carmelite convent. She still produced her works. She tried to synthesize phenomenology with the philosophy of Thomas Aquinas, both beginning with our subjective involvement in the world around us. She wrote also more theological works like the Science of the Cross, the study of St. John of the Cross, and phenomenology as well. What is it going on within me, these various states that I go through as I contemplate God? When the Nazis came to power, she had to leave Cologne, and she was sent with her sister Rosa, who had also become a Carmelite nun. They were sent to another Carmelite convent in Holland at Echt. And there she continued her life. She learnt enough Dutch to become the portress while they sat at the gate behind the grill of the convent. She helped all sorts of people in all sorts of ways. And then, when the bishops of Holland saw what the Nazis were doing after their invasion to the Jews there, they protested. Already, Teresia Benedicta, as Edith Stein, had written to Pope Pius XI, and now the Nazis were persecuting the Jews in Holland, and the Dutch bishops protested from the pulpit. And in reprisal for that, all those Jews who'd become Catholics were rounded up. That meant that Teresia Benedicta and her sister both had to go to the Gestapo and present their papers and were put on a register. And it wasn't long after that that the knock came at the convent door and they were taken away. That happened on the 2nd of August in 1942. They were taken to the railway station, and there, with so many others, Jewish Christians, they were put in the cattle trucks, the doors were locked, and they began that week-long journey to Auschwitz. Some people didn't survive the journey. It was a blazing hot summer. Some people went mad. Mothers with children went crazy with grief and with terror. And it's reported that Sister Teresia Benedicta looked after those children until they arrived there and they were sent to their death. Teresia Benedicta a Cruce. Teresa, blessed by the cross. Benedicta a Cruce. The cross is the means of our blessing. The more that we are configured to the cross, the more we demonstrate the life of God within us. God, she said, is this ecstatic pouring out. And when we have union with that God, when this subject and that subject come together, he lives in us and shows that outside. We have such a limited perception of God here. But she said that those who are seeking the truth are seeking after God. And even when her old professor herself was about to die, she said to a friend who wrote to her, she said, I better read this, she said, she was simply certain that God reaches through our reticence and the native darkness of our intellectual, emotional makeup to bridge the gap and to fill us with his salvific presence. For her, she lived wisdom. Wisdom is truth with experience. And she did so in light of the glory of the cross, in which the whole world is redeemed, in which she united herself in that act of atonement for the sins of the world. So, happy feast. When we feel the cross, have confidence that it is the means of our salvation and the salvation of the world, and that it teaches us a wisdom that the masters of this world can never understand. Have confidence and she'll pray. May those holy angels who assisted her be with you today, with all those whom you love, both in this world and the next. God bless.